right. All right. So let's get started. Today, again, we're going to talk about mixed and complicated emotions. So the jumble of emotions that we could feel, or, we're angry, but really what's underneath that anger, or sometimes we feel two emotions at the same time that really seem to conflict with one another, but we're feeling on like, how do we help children understand that and build overall emotional awareness? How do we help them communicate their feelings and like sort of see the nuances and complexities of their emotions? If you are a Mightier family, you may be aware of some of these activities. This activity set that we're going to go through today comes from our Ocean of Emotions skill pack. So you may be familiar with a few of the activities that we'll go through today, but actually we're going to look at an expanded, after we go through the research, we're going to look at an expanded version, and there's basically a broader set of therapeutic activities that I'll share out by email afterwards. All right, so our agenda for today, we are going to start with a little bit of like the research and just how to think about emotional awareness and how to help a child build that skill and the value of emotional awareness. So first, we're going to look at the difference between emotions and emotional awareness. Then we're going to look at naming individual emotions, recognizing individual emotions. I feel angry. And then emotion blends. I feel angry and disappointed and frustrated and jealous. Like, how do we understand those more complex emotional experiences? We are also going to take a look at the interplay between specific executive functioning skills and emotional awareness. I have a chart and we'll go through the specific skills that are very important in noticing and recognizing and paying attention to your emotions. And therefore, for a child who maybe struggles with that executive functioning skill, like why it actually might be a little bit harder to be aware of your emotional state, but also really important to practice. So we'll just take a look at that, and then we'll go through all the activities, and I'll talk you through how to use them. And we're going to try to play with one of them at the end. All right, so to start, and this is, no new news to anyone, but like let's look at the difference between the emotion we feel versus emotional awareness. So this little image I have on the screen, when we think about emotion, right? Like that is the emotional response that happens in our body and in our brain when something happens, right? Like when we're in a certain situation, someone says something to us, our hope, our expectation for something wasn't met. What is that emotional response and reaction that happens internally? So how does it change our physiological state, right? What happens in our body to our heart rate, to our breathing patterns, right? That's part of our emotional response. What happens to our thinking patterns? Like how well can we focus? How are we having spiraling negative thoughts? Sort of what happens there? What happens to our motivation? Are we driven to make some sort of change? Is the emotion we feel excitement, and therefore like we're running after this thing, we're excited and motivated to go after this thing. And all of that is based on how we interpret a situation, right? Whether or not we are thinking about how we're interpreting a situation is another piece. But it's all based on like our perspective, our interpretation of something. So when we think about emotional response specifically, we are going to think about physiological changes. So increased heart rate, muscle tension, heat, right? Like heat, temperature in your face. We're also going to think about action tendencies, like what is your body wanting to do? What is like the urge? What is the impulse you're having? Or what is like the physical reaction you're having? So a couple examples I just have here on the left, like, is your urge to yell, to hit, to cry? Or are you doing those things, right? That is part of the emotional response. crossed arms. That's part of your emotional response. And then cognitively, like, do we have tunnel vision? Are we able to think flexibly about things or not? Are we stuck on the thing that is making us angry, say? Or are we able to be more open-minded, right? All of that is part of our emotional response. And that happens regardless of whether or not we know it's happening or recognize it's happening or like are aware or paying attention to whether or not it's happening. Emotional awareness, which is what we're going to focus on today, is being in tune with your emotional response, noticing your emotional response, paying attention to it, understanding it, and using it to, one, understand the emotion you are feeling, but then also use that information to do something about what you're feeling and make a decision and make a choice and have more control over your actions. So in the emotional awareness category, this would be noticing those physiological changes. My heart is pounding. My muscles feel tight. My face is hot, right? So it's noticing and having awareness of those things. Noticing the action or the urge that you're having, the impulse that you're having. I feel like yelling. I feel like hitting. I feel like crying right now, right? Not the fact that those things may or may not be happening, but noticing that you want to do those things. My arms are crossed. And then this one, and this is for younger kids, this is going to be harder, but like awareness of the cognitive change. I'm not thinking clearly. I'm stuck only thinking about the thing making me angry right now. That sort of awareness is also really important. But again, much harder for younger kids to sort of think a little more like objectively about their cognitive state. So, and then like kind of some more steps to emotional awareness. So noticing like, I feel angry. I feel angry because is another layer. And then because I feel angry, I need to do this. I'm angry about the situation. How do I handle it? Like those are all part of the emotional awareness side of the equation. So we're going to focus on emotional awareness today, right? Emotional response happens. It's valid. It happens for a reason. We don't always have control over the fact that it happens, but we're going to focus on the awareness side because it does actually help us do something about our emotional state and have some control and have some choice. A model that I really like, and we are going to, actually a number of our activity sets are built off of, is sort of like these layers of emotional awareness. And part of why I really like this is because emotional awareness, it clearly outlines that like emotional awareness is not just naming your emotion. That is part of it, but that is actually levels up from first noticing how your body feels. My face is hot, my mouth is dry, my heart is racing, my stomach feels sick, right? That bottom layer of the triangle here, that's interoception. If you're a Mightier family, you've maybe seen our Inner Space Explorer or Signals from Inner Space, that skill pack. That's all about interoception, like noticing those internal body cues that let you know how you're feeling. And it could be about emotions, or it could even be about like needing to use the bathroom or that you're hungry or anything like that. And that is a specific skill that kids with ADHD and kids with autism are actually going to struggle a little more with. So that's a foundational layer of emotional awareness. The next layer up is sort of noticing those action tendencies, how you are acting or how you want to act, what those impulses are, what those urges are. That's the next level up. I feel like hitting, I feel like avoiding people, things like that. Those two layers are not covered here. Those are covered elsewhere in our materials. What we're going to talk about today are levels 3 and 4, naming individual emotions. I feel angry, I feel sad, and then naming and recognizing those like coexisting, more complex emotional experiences. I feel angry and relieved. I feel sad and hopeful, right? How do I understand feeling two emotions at once? So that's where we're going to do our work today, is on levels 3 and 4. Level 5 in this model has to do with like noticing emotions in yourself and in others. So we're not going to get there today, although because with all of our activities, we recommend that like caregivers do this with your child, like you demonstrate your own, you model your own emotional awareness as part of the process. I do think that actually, in a sense, like helps your child understand, like, oh, wow, I can think about someone else. I can see someone else's emotional state. So it gets to that a little bit. Okay, so oftentimes, we're going to focus on like level 3, noticing and naming individual emotions. Oftentimes you might see like a line, like a scale that's like a line, and it's like, how are you feeling? And it's like the faces, for a lot of times for kids, it's just faces. And the range might be from like sad to happy, or like calm to angry, like very linear, which for some kids might be like the best we can do in terms of understanding, especially for a younger child. But that leaves a lot out of the equation because our emotions are not like on this binary scale. Actually, and this mood meter came out of a team at Yale who was noticing gaps in like what was out there for tools and resources for understanding and talking about emotions, especially in schools. And they came up with this mood meter, which looks at emotions across 4 quadrants. And so there's like a lot of research that was done previously also using this 4-quadrant model. But basically on the vertical, we're talking about energy. So if you think about heart rate, motivation, we're like, that's what that axis is about, right? So like when you're up on like the higher end, oh, hold on, let me see. Let me go back in the slideshow. Well, if you're up on like that higher end, we're talking about like your heart rate is up high, your body is sort of like in this more energetic, motivated, possibly like reactive mode, versus if you're lower down on, like you're closer to like the floor of this, that's low energy, low heart rate, low motivation, things like that. And then across the horizontal, we're talking about pleasantness or like comfort. How much do you enjoy feeling this emotion? So we're not talking about emotions as good or bad. Emotions are not good or bad, positive or negative, anything like that ever. It is, we like feeling some emotions and we don't like feeling other emotions, right? Or like, this is a comfortable emotion for me, and this is an uncomfortable emotion for me, right? Like sadness is uncomfortable sometimes, but it's not necessarily like a bad emotion, right? Like it has a reason. Like all our emotions have valid reasons. So I really like this 4-quadrant model. And we're actually at Mightier, we're working on a little micro game that will work its way into the kid app. It eventually, hopefully in the next few months, where kids are kind of exploring it like through imagery, emotions, and trying to like put them into like a quadrant, which will be kind of fun, a fun way to get kids to play around with this. But so as you think about this, it kind of breaks out. Upper left quadrant is going to be like emotions you don't enjoy feeling, but they're high energy. So a lot of things around anger, frustration, anxiety, things like this that don't feel good, but you're also really revved up when you feel them. And then lower down on that same unpleasant and low energy, so bottom left quadrant, is going to be emotions that you don't enjoy feeling, but you're pretty low energy when you do feel them. So a lot of that sadness, bored, being apathetic, things like that. If we move to the right, emotions we do enjoy feeling, the high energy ones are going to be kind of like playfulness, silliness, excitement, like happiness in general, right? So like this high energy, like feeling good emotional state, versus feeling like emotions we enjoy feeling, but low energy would be more of like the calm, relaxed, content, that sort of state. So I just really like that model. There's also like gradients to this, right? Like you can see that some emotions are kind of sit like in the middle, where your heart rate is only a little up or a little down, or like how much you enjoy feeling this emotion could kind of go either way. So this is a cool tool, and there are some kid-friendly versions out there. I just found this online. That is you can see it's broken it down into just like four emotions in each quadrant that are words kids probably know, faces that are like pretty recognizable, and then it color codes and then categorizes by comfort and energy level. So that's a nice little visual to use with kids, like with your own child or in a classroom, in your office, anything like that. The other part to this, let me go back. So the other part to this is so here you can get to the point where kids are saying like, I feel this and this, but this is a nice way, if a child is younger, or say they are only able to talk about the emotion they are feeling, like they aren't at the point where they can talk about feeling multiple emotions at once yet. This is a nice way to kind of broaden their thinking of the one emotion that they are feeling. Because sometimes it is one-dimensional for kids, like they are only able to identify one. All right, so now let's get to like the idea of mixed or blended emotions. This could be a variety of things. This could be feelings that are like opposed to or clearly different from one another, or emotions that are similar, but like more nuanced. So similar, but more nuanced would be like, rather than like, I feel angry right now, it would be, okay, I feel angry and disappointed and frustrated and lonely and confused, right? Like all of those emotions are fairly similar, and like all of those more nuanced emotions make up my anger in that moment. Or we could think about emotions that are opposed to or different from one another. So opposite valence or opposite pleasantness, opposite comfort is sort of that idea. So can you feel emotions that are at two ends of like that pleasantness spectrum? So two different points on that horizontal. Can you feel proud, which is in that like lower right-hand quadrant of like you're calm, but you feel good, and lonely, like you're calm, but it doesn't feel good. Like, can you feel both of those at once? And we can. And that's complicated, and that can be complicated to sit with. So same thing, like disgust and amusement, disappointed and relieved, scared and excited, right? Like those emotions are kind of all sit on the same level energy wise, but at different points on that like comfort or pleasantness spectrum. And we do have those experiences all the time. And we have a game that will like help kids explore that. And so development matters here, age matters. There is research that suggests around age 5 to 8, kids are starting, like before that point, kids might understand their emotions as like, I felt this, and then I felt this, and then I felt this, right? So it's like sequential, but then around age like 5 to 8, kids start moving into like recognizing simultaneous emotions. I felt this and this. So that is very child dependent, depends on like their development in a lot of ways, but just something to kind of keep in mind. All right, so why does any of this matter? Why does labeling and understanding our emotions matter? So emotional awareness allows you to interpret the emotional signals and information coming from your body, and then get to the next step of doing something intentionally with that information. I feel this, so I need to do this, right? So it kind of gives us a formula. The act of naming your emotional state actually has an automatic inhibitory effect on your emotional response. So rather than just like being in the moment and feeling angry or anxious and reacting to it, that step of like stopping, noticing, and naming actually like acts as a stopgap between the feeling and the reaction. So that's huge, especially for kids who struggle with emotional regulation, right? So this, you can see here that like, and this actually gets to the next point, that like greater emotional awareness actually supports greater emotional regulation abilities, and vice versa. Like lower emotional awareness is linked to greater emotional reactivity. So this is a skill we want to build. And then, like I talked about before, difficulty with this is going to be relevant for kids who struggle with certain executive functioning skills. And that just means we need to practice it more. It just means it's important to understand, like, okay, like I get why this might be harder for you, and we're going to work on it. And that's what this table looks at. So if we, so across the top, I have like a few executive functioning skills listed out, and then below how they relate to emotional awareness. So if you have a child who struggles, just like how their brain works, like problem solving is a little harder, especially in moments when maybe they're like feeling their emotions intensely. It might be harder to figure out how things work when that like when my body feels this way, it means that I am feeling this, right? Like that sequencing might just, putting those puzzle pieces together might just be a little harder for them. They just might need to work on it more. Understanding why, like the reasoning, I feel this way because, and then also like the emotion blend piece, breaking the problem apart. I feel this and this. Just something that they're going to probably have to work a little more on. Flexible thinking. So this really gets at the change factor. Like, what do you do about it once you recognize how you feel? I can feel differently than I expect. And then that ability to actually change your thoughts, use a coping skill to feel an emotion less intensely, right? That sort of flexible thinking is going to be really important to work on. Working memory, in the moment recall, right? Like in a calm moment, I know this information, I can talk about this, I can recognize how I feel. And then when I get into real life, a real situation where I am actually feeling this emotion and there are other things going on and like lots of distractions, the ability to recall that information, right? Like that's your working memory. Again, just going to take more practice. Attentional control is a big one. And it's mainly like that ability to like direct your attention to how you're feeling, right? There's a lot going on around you. If you're upset about something, there's a situation going on probably that's making you upset. And that is probably what's pulling your attention, right? Because your attention is going to be grabbed and driven by the thing that feels exciting or feels new. Whether that excitement is like an enjoyable or unenjoyable excitement, like that's where your attention is going to go. And so actually that ability to pull it back and pay attention to like your body cues and how you feel and what it means, that's harder for kids who struggle with attentional control. And then self-monitoring. So like just that self-reflective piece, thinking deeply about how you feel and why, noticing patterns in how you feel, all of that. So if you have a child diagnosed with ADHD or autism and you notice that they struggle with emotional awareness, like it makes sense. It's like that totally makes sense. And then hopefully just practicing it, playing with it, helps them build the skill in a number of ways. All right, so this is going to be our little formula for how we're going to approach this. We're going to start with noticing and describing individual feelings. Then we're going to move to exploring the experience of multiple emotions at once. We're going to use a variety of methods. So we're going to use drawing, narrative, conversation, gameplay, crafts. Everything we do at Mightier uses play. One, for engagement, because we want to hold kids and make this fun and keep them coming back to practice, and engagement matters there, but also because play promotes deeper learning. So that's why we use play. We are going to try to make it real, like connect to like a child's life, their emotional experiences, modeling. So you are a big part of this. Helping your child build emotional awareness by demonstrating your own is really important. And then if there's like this chance to open up things up for deeper conversation, that's awesome. And then practice is always important. All right, so we're going to get to our activities. This is just a quick screenshot of like the packet I'm going to send you has just like a little bit of like an overview for you and like a little bit of the research and what kids are learning in the activity set. So that part's just for you. But then we'll get to the activities. So we have, let me just check something quickly. Okay. All right. So this first activity that we're going to do is using art to explore and describe individual emotions. So this is very simple. Anyone of any age can do this. The images I have up here, I did with my 4-year-old daughters. And they, like, the way they do this is very, like, they're 4, so it's very reflective of a 4-year-old. So if you have an older child, you're gonna, like, you will get more sophisticated responses. I'll share what they actually did for theirs. But the way this works is you are drawing your emotions as if they are the ocean, as if they are the sea. Our metaphor for this entire activity set is the ocean. So we're going to use sea creatures. We're going to use the idea of like things hidden under the surface, waves, finding all the ways to use that metaphor of the ocean to talk about emotions in different ways. So here you can do this with as many emotions as you want, but like we just have outlined like anger, happiness, worry, and sadness. Draw those emotions, draw those feelings as if they are the ocean. What would the ocean look like if it was angry? What would the ocean look like if it was happy? What would it look like if it was worried, sad? And then write a few examples of what could make you or the ocean feel this way. When I did this with my daughters, it was like, they just drew waves with like faces on the waves. Like that's that's where their brain can take it. So a wave with a smiley face, a wave with a frowny face. And then the examples of what would make the ocean angry or sad, it was like, it doesn't have any fish, or, just like it, or happiness, it got ice cream, very reflective of their own little 4-year-old state. Okay, so that's one starting point. This can be goofy. This can be, you can make this bigger, right? We didn't give you much space on this sheet to like really do this activity. So you could make this into a bigger thing, like get a big piece of paper, get like a lot of materials. Like you could really turn this into something more engaging if you have those materials and your child enjoys doing art. This next one is all about the emotions that are similar to one another, but might be buried below the surface. So this is, if many people are familiar with the idea of like the anger iceberg, right? That like you see the anger above the water, and then like all the emotions below, there's all these emotions below the surface that you might not so readily like recognize or be aware of, but they're part of like what makes up that anger. So this is the same idea, but just like applied to other emotions as well. What's within the anger? What's within the happiness? What's within the annoyance, sadness, anxiousness? And so again, you can use any emotions for this. Let kids create their own sea creatures, or just have them use our sheet and fill it out. We put like a word bank in there. So if they just want to fill out for the angry shark or the annoyed squid, I think that's a squid, what emotions would go underneath. Okay. This next one is definitely relevant for therapeutic settings, relevant for home as well, if your child will engage with it. So this one, because I'm prefacing this by saying like, this has a little more of a therapeutic feel to it, the actual activity. But a lot of kids and caregivers, like you might be like totally fine with that. So the way this works is there are a bunch of emotion words in blocks. You're going to cut those out. You can add to that list, expand that, only use some of them, whatever you like. And then there are some prompts. So the point here is that we wear some emotions on our sleeve. We recognize some emotions, we show some emotions, and others are more hidden, right? Others are beneath the surface. So the prompts sort of have you rank emotions in that order. of, so what the first prompt is like, which emotions do you let people see, right? So it might be like, okay, I let people see when I'm hopeful or happy or overwhelmed, but I'm going to hide it. When I'm confused, I'm hiding that. Or when I'm lonely, I hide that, right? So like this idea of getting kids to kind of like rank, like what's above the surface for you and what's below. Another prompt, which emotions do you enjoy feeling? Which emotions do you feel most often, right? You can make up a bunch of prompts for this. And I would recommend like you do this as well. Like this is one that I think benefits a lot from modeling. Just to sort of like help your child like understand it, but also normalize that like we all do this. We all hide our emotions sometimes. We all have emotions we don't like feeling, or that we feel a lot, or that we don't feel very often, right? Like just normalize that whole experience. This next one is, we call it Sanguine Lugas. It is mostly funny, but it is just the idea that like, if you were to combine two emotion words, what would it be? What would that word be? And we made like a little mixed emotion sea creature. Not all of these are totally mixed emotions, like two emotions that are on like different pleasantness, like ranked in different, like I don't enjoy feeling this, or I do enjoy feeling this, but like that is the goal with this. So nervopeful is nervous and hopeful, right? Scare-sighted is scared and excited. So this is just playful. Try to figure out what the emotion word combos are, and then make your own. So this is the fun part of let your child choose two emotions, combine them, make up a funny word, draw what that sea creature looks like. You can do this as well. You can have them, you can challenge one another to try to figure out what you made. Based on the word, maybe based on the drawing as well, if you're a good drawer. So that one's like kind of goofy, but does get you to think about mixed emotions. There's a little narrative here. Miriam is our labeling for this activity set. Miriam is like a snail that hides in her shell a lot, but she like wants to be out and social and doing things. So like there's a specific situation that Miriam deals with, that you'll read through, and then there are two activities here. One is writing a letter to Miriam, just basically like ideally like if you or your child has ever felt this way, like what advice would you give Miriam? What would you tell her to just let her know she's not alone, like this is normal, like validate her. And then a little finish the comic. So create your own story about Miriam, based on what you know she struggles with. This one is another one that is a little more on the therapeutic side. It's a movement activity, but uses Miriam and like puts her in different situations, and you choose how Miriam would feel. So like Miriam's going to move to a new beach. She's going to miss her friends, but she's heard great things about her new school. Like, how do you think Miriam feels? Does she feel sad or excited? The reality is like she probably feels somewhere in the middle or a combination of both. The way we have this set up is that you choose 2 points in a room, and one point is like the beach wall and it represents one emotion, and the other point is the ocean wall and it represents a different emotion, and move to where you think Miriam would stand. And then it like opens up some conversation, especially if you're doing this with multiple people, because you might all move to a different spot in the room, which then like gives you something to talk about. And our last one, I think this is our last one. Oh, our last actual like real activity is fishing for feelings. This is one of my favorite games that we've made. I'm gonna find my little fishing pole. I don't know where it went. But basically, so this is a little bit of a craft. You're going to cut out a fishing pole, and then you're going to cut out these little feeling fish that are just like little scrap things at the bottom. They have emotion words written on them. So you fold up your little emotion. This one says curious. I'm going to fold it up, put it on a table. It's a little fish now. And then you cut out your fishing pole. And what you do is you're going to take turns. You could play this with more than two people, or more than two people, but you're going to take turns snagging two fish at once with your pole. And then the goal is you want to have the most points. So if you can name a time you felt two emotions at once. So if I snag right now, let's see, if I snag like lonely and curious, if I can name a time that I felt both of these emotions at once, then I get 2 points. I put the fish back, play continues. If you can't name a time you felt both emotions at once, that's fine. Try to do one emotion. When did you feel lonely, or when did you feel curious? And get a point. And you could end this game however you'd like, set like a number of points to it. But this is really, it gets you to have some motivation around figuring out when you have felt two emotions at once. And some of these are going to be hard, like off the top of my head. I don't know. I could probably think of something that a time I felt lonely and curious, but off the top of my head, like that's actually a little challenging. So this is fun. And then you just kind of play with like the different combos you get. Sometimes they're going to be kind of similar to one another. Sometimes they'll be more on like that opposite ends of a spectrum. Okay, and then this is something you can choose to use if you'd like. This is all about the practice. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, practice is really important. Like paying attention to how you feel, what you're thinking on a regular basis is like a really great foundational skill to build. So this really just hones in on paying attention to how you feel on a regular basis. So it's sort of just like a daily check-in. Right now I'm feeling what? I'm feeling this way because I've also felt these emotions today. Maybe add a little drawing. If my emotions were waves, they would look like this. We have just 4 days laid out. You could add, if your child is into this, you could do that on a regular basis. You could make it like a family activity as well. Okay, like at dinner for the next week, like let's all try to do this. Like let's all take a turn checking in on how we feel or emotions we felt today, just to get that practice in and talk about it a little bit. Okay, and so that is it for our presentation today. I'm going to email you the recording of this and email you the resource pack that you can download and print off. If you are not a Mightier member, if you're not a Mightier family and you're not already receiving this stuff regularly from us, like you're not on our newsletter, this link, which I will include in my email to anyone who is not a member, brings you to our resources page. On that resources page, we have a bunch of activities that you can just are free. You can go through and download. And then if you do sign up for our newsletter, which there's an email capture at the bottom of that page. If you do sign up for our newsletter, we send out a set of activities and educational content every month. And it's all centered around a specific theme. So if you're interested in that for your own home or for your therapeutic setting, like that stuff goes out on a regular basis. All right, so I thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop the chat, or excuse me, stop the recording, and we'll see you next month. Bye.